Hello and welcome to Neptune's Beyond Textbook, the new curriculum narrative. In today's episode, we are going to be diving deep into all the major paradigm shifts which are unleashed by the NEP 2020 and the NCF 2023. I'm your host, Anju Shazo, and I have with me none other than Mrs. Anita Karwal, the former Secretary of School Education and Literacy with the Government of India. So, very warm welcome to you, Anita, once again.
Thank you.
And today, well, when we're talking about the major paradigm shifts, we're already talking about moving away from rote learning, textbook centric learning, going beyond the classrooms, experiential learning. Now, all of these shifts, if we may call them, have been already foreseen by a lot of great Indian educators, isn't it? This is part of the decolonization of education, isn't it?
Absolutely. And actually, we spoke at length about decolonization in our previous episode. So I would request our viewers and listeners to actually see the previous episode.
Absolutely. The episode 1 talks at length about it. Now, when we're talking about decolonization and we're talking about many of the great Indian educators, if we look at uh, Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, Jiddu Krishnamurti, Gijubai Badeka,
Swami Vivekananda.
Vivekananda, all of them actually, in a way, were frustrated with the rigid colonial educational system that was prevailing across the country. And if you look at Rabindranath Tagore, in 1901, he established the Shanti Niketan, which was a revolutionary concept at its time. And in that, he encouraged children to move beyond the confines of the four walls of the classroom and go and study under the trees, be connected with nature.
Yes. And beyond that, he actually broke down the barriers of discipline also. So, the curriculum integrated the arts and the humanities with the sciences and the mathematics, etc. For the first time after the Britishers came to India, which used to happen, of course, in the Gurukul system, but it happened for the first time
Right.
with Sri Rabindranath Tagore. And also the students, they learned through direct experience. That was very interesting. And that pedagogy is what we are trying to bring back through the NEP.
Right. And I think these were all so rooted in the Indian contexts.
Yeah.
That is what they all were talking about. Experience, the idea of direct experience is not something new to Indian texts at all. It has always been part of the Indian
It
culture.
has been, yes.
And that's what the NEP 2020 seems to be doing, is simply to reviving that ancient system, or what is really inherent to the Indian philosophical practices also.
And also is child friendly. Let us not forget that. Practices which are not student friendly or child friendly actually need not be taken forward. But we have gone through a very, very child friendly education system earlier. And that is what the NEP is looking at. And there is a lot of scientific evidence also to prove that these provisions of the NEP are actually student, learner, and child friendly.
Yes, and I think that's such an important need given the current context, where in the last few years we've seen children really feel very anxious. The levels of anxiety and fear has been coming in a lot into the children.
Yes.
So moving, and also much of that education was not useful to us. It was really
Yes.
based on the rote learning, and
Yeah.
so we all know that now. So let's come to the idea of what are the paradigms. We're talking about a paradigm shift. So what's really a paradigm? It's a kind of a worldview, isn't it? A major shift. That's what paradigm means.
Yes. So the present worldview, the way we look at things, the way we do things, the way we perceive things, and the way we act upon them, when it shifts completely into a different mindset, a different way of acting upon, then it is called a paradigm shift. And NEP has actually ushered in paradigm shifts in various areas.
Right. I think that's an important point to start off with. So what would be the first paradigm shift according to you?
So, Anju, I would say the first paradigm shift would be the fact that NEP wants us to focus on the child and not on the institution or the school or the teacher or textbooks. It is the child. What does the child need? And in NEP, it is very clearly laid down in NCF and NEP that all learning begins when the child feels socio-emotionally capable of learning. Therefore, the whole idea of giving the child a safe environment, a comfortable environment, a joyful and engaging environment to learn is the beginning of all learning, I would say that is the first paradigm shift.
Right.
And Anju, I remember that in your school, once you were interviewing some children and asking them what makes them happy to come to school.
Yes.
I just thought you should tell the listeners about it.
Yes, and though we know this somehow, but it's lovely to hear from children. And I asked them, what do you think is a welcoming environment? And the first thing they said was a smile of the teacher. And I thought that's such a simple thing that teachers can do. So many teachers forget to acknowledge the child when the child walks into the classroom. So the welcoming point of view of the teacher towards the child is the first thing. So smiling, acknowledging. The other things they said was the colorful displays in the classroom, the friendliness of the teacher. So obviously the relationship with the teacher is the first factor.
Yeah.
They want teachers not to be formal and rigid and authoritarian. They want teachers to be loving and somebody who jokes. That's what they said. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, we like when the teacher makes jokes." They also said that they like colorful displays in the classroom. Uh, they have this ownership when they put their own things on the walls. They draw, they paint. Uh, Another important thing was about the interaction with peers. They said we like it when we're able to look at each other and we're able to work with each other. So, obviously moving away from that linear seating arrangement and making collaborative seating arrangements is more conducive to a better ecosystem for children to learn together. And apart from the interaction also amongst the children, they also seem to like it when there are these energizers or icebreaker activities. They say that it helps them feel more comfortable, get to know each other. I think these are the starting points for a conducive class environment.
Yes. So, if we go back to the shift, the paradigm shift in which NEP has brought about in the way we look at the child. So, what the NEP actually wants is that we should recognize the three contexts in which the child actually lives. One is the school, the second is the home, and the third is the community. So, as far as the school is concerned, we just spoke about the shift that NEP wants, that it should be safe, welcoming, joyful. There should be a proper teacher pupil ratio,
Mm.
there should be inclusion, there should be collaboration. And you spoke about, how joyfulness comes inside the classroom, etc. There should be no bullying, etc. So, this is what the school is all about. At home, it is the duty of the parents to ensure that the child lives in a positive environment, gets time to study, gets time to play, has a very positive environment at home. And in the society, it is important that we eliminate all discriminations uh, as far as the child is concerned, whether it is gender based, whether it is marks based, examination
Oh,
based, or talent based, or merit based. All discrimination must go. So, this is what the idea is, to ensure that the child is able to come out with their unique potential.
I think when you mentioned that there should be no bullying in the classroom or no discrimination outside. Obviously, this sounds like a very tall order, and it sounds very utopian. And we know that classrooms are not going to be devoid of that. So the way forward is also to acknowledge that these things exist and to give children the life skills to handle them. For example, bullying. Yes, bullying is happening a lot. It's happening online also. Children are subjected to so many things that they see on the internet and etc. So the point is really how can we bring
Yes.
some sort
Make
of
the child
skills.
capable of
Yes.
handling these
And this
situations.
should be woven into the curriculum. This should
Yes.
be part. I mean, this is not. We are helping children learn how to deal with life situations.
Yeah.
So this should come into the
Now
classroom.
that you're saying it should be a part, I should just mention that just holding one workshop in a year on bullying or anti bullying does not mean that the child has learned anything. It has to be actually integrated in the whole classroom process.
Yes, and that's why the discussions are important. Children should be able to, and obviously, this is I think this probably needs a full podcast
Yes.
separately because
Yeah.
it's become a very major issue in a lot of schools. So, well, we will come back to that later. I think we should now go to the next paradigm. I would like to know what's the next paradigm shift according to you.
Yeah. So the next paradigm shift is the shift in the way we look at learning standards. So the earlier term learning outcome is now replaced with a wider term called learning standards. And learning standards is actually derived in the form of a hierarchy. From the aims of education, we have derived the curricular goals, from where we have derived the competencies, from where the teachers and the schools can derive the learning outcomes. This whole group of competency, curricular goals, aims of education, learning outcomes together are called learning standards. But the shift is not there. The system was that every grade, every subject will have learning outcomes. The shift is Every stage has learning standards. And now the learning standards do not have to be achieved grade wise, they have to be achieved stage wise. So, if certain learning standards are prescribed for preparatory stage, they can be achieved at any point of time in grades 3, 4, or 5. That is a very, very huge shift.
Yes, so this is definitely qualifies under the umbrella for paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because what earlier was happening was that children were being taught and assessed according to their age and according to the grade in which they are. Now, what the NEP is saying is that the children are going to be learning, and as the assessment will take place according to the stage, developmental stage. And if the child is in the preparatory year stage, then it can be in either grade 3, 4, or 5. So, to take a very practical example, let's take the subject of mathematics.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's say it's a preparatory stage. And let's say that the curricular goal is CG1 in mathematics, which is understands and carries out the 4 basic operations with whole numbers. Right now, that means the understanding of the child may be partial in grade 3, a little more in grade 4, and somewhat complete in grade 5 for one child. For another child, it may be very good already in grade 3, and by the time the child comes to grade 5, the child has mastered it. So, children are learning at different levels, at different pace, and what the teacher has to ensure is that this particular competency, the learning outcome under that standard, is achieved in the stage
itself. So we do not have to insist that everything has to be achieved in grade 3 itself. Like you said, children are different. So we have to treat them differently. And that is why the stage concept has come in. And it's a huge paradigm shift.
It is. And I think this, I really want to point out to both educators and parents not to panic. If one child has got it and the other child is still struggling, it is perfectly okay. Because this child's developmental stage is at a different pace. And given that the span of the developmental stage, the child will get it.
You know, Anju, I must point out here that most of this panic which comes in parents comes from the log kya kahenge factor. And this log kya kahenge has really pulled down many of our children. Children who were actually going to do well at a slightly later period within that stage actually go back because of their parents' panic about log kya kahenge.
Log kya kahenge, and the other child, dusra bachcha kya kar raha hai, all these things which are plying in the parents' mind. And in fact, sometimes teachers also fall into that.
Yes, they do.
They get
Teachers are not above this.
Yeah, they fall into that pressure of competitiveness, and sometimes you're responding to children who are doing well as opposed to the children who are struggling. There's also this bias that can come in. So I think we need to respect the fact that this child is at one particular point in the learning journey, and the other child is at a different point in the learning. And the learning is a journey, and within that developmental stage. I hope that's clear to the...
Yes, I really hope so.
Well,
I really hope
for
so.
this.
Yeah.
Good. So let's go to now the third paradigm shift, which seems to be dealing with content. It's about, we've been very content driven as a society.
Yes.
So now what are the key changes that we see?
So, Anju, I think for the benefit of the listeners, let's play a game.
Okay.
You tell me what do you think was the status pre-NEP with regard to the content, and I'll tell you what is the change post-NEP.
Okay, so one of them, the first one I think what comes to mind is the centricity of the textbooks as the main source of knowledge.
Okay, excellent. So the NCF has a line which actually says this: reduce the centricity of textbooks, which means that textbooks are not the end-all and be-all of every education. Textbooks are just one of the tools which can be used for the purpose of education. The teachers are free to use as many tools as they want to.
So it's fantastic.
Yes.
We make content first and then we superimpose the learning outcomes on them.
Yeah, that used to happen. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that learning standards have become the central thing about learning. So the competencies and the curricular goals. So now the competencies and curricular goals have been defined first, and the textbooks are now being prepared based on those competencies, because the child has to achieve competencies and not achieve the completion of a chapter anymore.
So in big bold letters, the curriculum is the competencies and not the textbook. So there is no need to rote learn the particular chapters and paragraphs, and mug up definitions and whatever. It's really the competency that is the curriculum, and that's the syllabus. So, a lot of teachers keep saying, what's the syllabus? Oh, the syllabus is so much. And again, reminder, the competencies are across the stage and not just a particular age. It's
Great. Yes.
fundamental. Okay, another one is that so far the content used to be divorced from the real life context of the child.
Yes. Now it has been laid down that the content must be contextualized to the real life of the child. And I think we'll come to that later. I'll explain about contextualization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Singular textbooks, the textbook as the sole source of gaining knowledge, that was happening.
Yes. So now there is a specific provision in NEP as well as in NCF that the teachers have complete autonomy in, deciding what kind of content or teaching learning material they would like to use in what class for which competency to be achieved. So that autonomy has been given to the teachers. The teachers can actually use online, offline material. They can actually use journals, magazines, newspapers, books, storybooks, anything as long as the competency is being achieved. The textbook is, of course, going to remain there because we are a resource scarce nation. So wherever nothing is available, the textbook is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the textbook is not prescribed as the sole source
No.
of information or learning for the child. That is just so wonderful because it allows teachers the autonomy, the creativity. It allows us to give greater exposure to children in the classrooms.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Also, till now, I think the skills were not integrated into the learning experience.
Not at all. But now the 21st century skills, in fact, all of them, we'll be doing a whole podcast on 21st century skills. All the skills are integrated. They are a part of the competencies and curricular goals themselves. So it's very easy for the teachers or for the learners to actually understand and imbibe these skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, the content, I think, was available only in very select languages.
Yes, but now the whole idea is that the content has to be accessible. The child should be able to access it through the language known to the child. So now content can be bilingual. NEP has said science and maths textbook should be bilingual. It can be in the language of the child, medium of instruction of the child. So content has to become. I want to give you the example of Diksha, the Government of India platform on which a lot of content is there. More than almost 3 lakh pieces of content. It's in 36 languages. So, including the languages which are laid down in the constitution, there are other languages like Chhattisgarhi, which is not a part of that. So, local dialects are also there.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So I think also when we're talking about content, we can also talk a little bit about emergent curriculum where you are looking at what are the things that children can do for their own community in their own school or in their own campus. So doing some real life projects, so they can be connected. The competencies can be done through them.
Through practical applications, through real life, that is also content.
Yes.
You have been always saying that actually the city is our textbook. You can learn so many things from the way a city runs
Absolutely.
or the city is. And you also do a lot of work in your school on
Yes,
actual hands-on work.
there are such simple things that children can do. If it's a let's say if the resources are scarce for a school, you ask children to look if there's any wastage in the school, related to water or electricity. So they can do an audit. They can do surveys of how many languages are spoken on their campus. So they can be surveys, data collection, problem solving, how much of rain falls, can we do rainwater harvesting. So I think these kind of things then you can do mini projects and then that can be mapped to the competencies that the children have to acquire.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's, I think, look at the next paradigm shift, which is contextualization.
Yes. So, which I had mentioned earlier.
What does that mean? What does contextualization mean?
In very simple words, it means that education can no longer remain disconnected from the real lives of or the real life experiences of the child. So, if we look at the two words, context and contextualization, context is, anything that helps us understand why or how a particular event or a situation has occurred. Okay. When we look at contextualization, when we try to make sense of that situation. So let me give you an example. We are sitting here in your school studio, for example. And so the context is a school studio. We are sitting here. There are some toys here. There's a plant here. And the wall here is painted blue. So when I want to contextualize for the child that why am I not wearing blue clothes today, I have to tell the child, look at the context. There is a blue wall. If I wear blue clothes, I will not be seen on the screen. So that is what I mean, that to understand everything, the real life application of everything is really essential.
yeah.
And the real life could be your culture, your history, your geography, your scientific efforts. Everything would count in that.
Yes.
Yes.
Everything is embedded in a context.
Yes.
Nothing exists in isolation.
Yes.
And what is
yes.
the context of the child or the learning group or the school is really very important.
Yes, you always give that example of the scenery. You must tell our
I
listeners.
love giving that example. So I'm going to just ask the viewers to simply put their finger in the air. And if I ask you to draw a scenery, the first scenery that comes to your mind, what scenery are you going to draw? 1, 2, 3. You're going to draw the mountains.
3 in number.
3 in number, right? A setting sun or a rising sun, a little hut, little birds, little river, maybe a palm tree, right?
Maybe a hut. Sometimes a hut.
A little hut.
Yeah.
You know, you ask this question to any person across generations from north to south of India, from east to west of India, and everybody is drawing the same scenery. How is that possible? So that's not education, it's conditioning. And even a child who's never seen the mountains is drawing the same scenery. A child who's in the desert regions, for example,
Is drawing the river. And children who have not seen palm trees, for example, are drawing palm trees. Yeah.
so that's really the standardization of art, and that's just so very sad.
Yeah. So that is why, let me just clarify. So, what are the paradigm shifts when we talk about contextualization?
Yeah.
The first paradigm shift is in the whole teaching learning process itself, we have to integrate contextualization. Everything that you're teaching in class, you have to bring that context to the child so that the child goes back home very excited and, understands and gets engaged with the learning.
Understands and can apply that.
Can apply, yes.
There are connections to be made.
Yes. And also, the NEP wants us to have knowledge of India as one of the major contexts. So, knowledge of India, we are sitting in Gujarat, so knowledge of Gujarat as well can be the cross cutting theme which helps in contextualization. That is the second thing that needs to be done. The third thing that needs to be done is that the NEP and NCF lay down the learning standards, the curricular goals, and the competencies. But the learning outcomes can be contextualized. They can be contextualized to the local surroundings, to the local culture, to the local requirements, or to the children's, surroundings and environment. And the last thing is that the pedagogy must include all local cultural, art, sports, etc. aspects.
All the storytelling,
Folktales, rhymes, myths, etc.
games.
Everything should be included. So that's what we mean by contextualization.
Since you mentioned pedagogy, isn't that another paradigm shift? Aren't we moving away from teacher-driven, teacher-centric pedagogies to learner-centric pedagogies? What does that imply?
Absolutely. And that is the next shift that we need to talk about, which is pedagogy. And maybe in that as well, we can do our small game so that, it's easier for our listeners to understand. So you tell me the pre-NEP status of pedagogy and I give you the post-NEP status of pedagogy.
Okay, so till now, there's been a lot of focus on the cognitive dimension of students to the exclusion of others.
So by cognitive, we mean the academic dimension. And now NEP says it's not just cognitive, but also the affective domain, that is the socio-emotional domain, and the psychomotor, that is the physical domain. All the domain. We have to focus on all of it. It's not just the cognitive domain.
It's much more holistic.
It's more holistic, yes.
Till now, learning has been disconnected with the real life contexts.
Yes, so now pedagogy, like I said, has to be completely contextualized. You can't just come in class, write down something which is written in the textbook and go out of class. You have to contextualize it for the child. Yeah.
Subjects have been taught in watertight compartments with no connections between them.
So here there is a huge shift. Now the shift is that every topic, every concept, every competency which a child imbibes must be with the basis of multidisciplinarity. So there are no silos, there are no watertight compartments. Everything can be taught with multiple perspectives.
Teacher-centric pedagogies till now have been prevalent.
Yeah, so this becomes student-centric completely, student-owned with student agency. So this needs to change, where students themselves are doing their research, their group discussions, they're learning, they're writing their portfolios, they're doing a lot of activities. That is the idea.
The focus has been only on certain types of pedagogy till now, like really textbook driven, just listening.
Rote learning. Yeah. So now innovative pedagogies, in fact, some innovative pedagogies are actually mentioned in the NEP itself. So if you look at NEP, play-based learning, inquiry-based, discovery-based learning, experiential learning, storytelling-based learning, art integrated and sport
Project-based
integrated learning. Then NCF has brought in project-based learning as well, competency-based learning. So the gamut is huge. And what the NEP desires is that bring the child socio-emotionally to the class by engaging the child in any innovative pedagogy that you feel is fit for the class.
So the teacher can actually choose what is
Yes,
best fit.
yeah.
There haven't been any integration of skills, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, now skills are integrated in the competencies itself, and it needs to be integrated in the pedagogy and the assessment process as well. Yeah.
So I would say, till now, as we would say in Hindi, bhoot sawar tha syllabus ka.
Haan.
Teachers were driven by, have to finish a syllabus. It was never learner centric till now.
Yes. So isme, as I mentioned, ki syllabus, textbooks, they have to take the backstage. Now it is the student and the competencies that the student has to acquire. We have to bring them together.
And I think the socio-emotional part is so important, allowing children to express. You cannot teach an unhappy child anything.
Yeah.
So I remember I was teaching a text to students of grade 12, and this particular child was very disturbed. He was a boy. And I asked the students to draw whatever symbols were connected in that novel. And so, it's interesting because when you give crayons and paper to adolescents, it reminds them of their kindergarten years. They love drawing. We forget how much we all love it, actually. So this boy actually drew nothing which was related to the text. He drew something else, which was very violent and odd. So I didn't judge that, and I just let it be. We had an exhibition. We looked at what was related to the text, and later on he came to me, and then he opened up with whatever was bothering him, which was related to his family, etc. So this space that we need to have in the classrooms, where you need to allow the expression, because children are coming with a lot of other baggages. There may be something happening at home or in the context. And if the child is unhappy, and when we say child, even the adolescent is still somewhere a child, we need to continue with these kind of pedagogies which allow, using expressive arts, performing arts, drawing, singing. Singing is so easy to do. So children at least get a way to relieve themselves of that anger or something that's bothering them.
So that brings us back to the first principle which we discussed, the first paradigm shift, that every learning is socio-emotional. So unless we understand that there is an emotion behind it, there is something that is happening to the child which is preventing the child from learning, it's not going to happen. So it's very important for the teacher to be able to understand the socio-emotional perspective from which the child is coming and include it in the pedagogy.
I was reading, just something comes to my mind. When I was doing my doctorate, I had read this research, lovely book about how in the history of education, emotions have been kept out of the classroom.
Yeah.
And that goes hand in hand with the marginalization of women. Like the way women have been kept out of mainstream work or whatever, mainstream life, emotions were also kept out. I mean, these were two parallel movements. And now with more women coming into mainstream and are acknowledging that we are holistic individuals with our head, heart and hands. So the heart was missing.
Yeah.
And now we are again bringing that back into classrooms. And I think that's just so important.
Yeah, very important. I agree.
I think there was a mention, you'd mentioned something about a Baltimore school once.
Oh, yes. So this is a very interesting experiment that they did in Maryland. So in Baltimore, there is a school where they used to have a detention room. And all these children, there was a lot of, conflict and disputes and a lot of bullying, etc. going on. And children would go in huge numbers into the detention room every day. Post-school, they would have to be there for 2 to 3 hours to do some work. And it was not working. So some creative person in that school, I don't remember who, decided to call it the meditation room instead. And every child who went in there was forced to understand the process of meditation and sit calmly and meditate. And there is a study on it which showed that, the conflict in the school, all the issues in the school, it really came down just by this one intervention.
Isn't that marvelous?
Yes.
And the fact that meditation is something that is so inherent in the Indian culture,
Yes.
it's really odd that we're not doing enough of it in our classrooms. I think there's enough research evidence that points to the impact of meditation, and even short term, even 5 minutes would be very beneficial for children.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that can be practiced. I try to find excuses to do that in my classroom most of the time, and I try to make connections. So, you can bring in music, you can even just a gong, just a bell, and just to calm down the breathing and the body. And I think that is
Yeah.
important for children. And I'm glad that this is an important part of the NEP now. The mental health and well-being is given so much of importance.
Yes, it is.
So let's go to the other paradigm shift now, which is about the breaking away the silos of subjects and going towards multidisciplinary education.
Yes. So far we have been following something that we called monodisciplinarity, because here the subjects are isolated from one another. There is a class teacher who will teach, or a subject teacher who will teach and go out. And the children will not get to know the connections between subjects. So NEP requires us now to have multidisciplinary perspective. In fact, as far as possible, even from preparatory stage, definitely from middle and secondary stage. But why not from foundational and preparatory stage itself in its own grade appropriate and age appropriate manner? So, multidisciplinarity, the whole idea is to examine a topic or a concept from multiple perspectives, from multiple disciplines' point of view. It is slightly different from interdisciplinarity. For example, the subject called the world around us in preparatory stage is an interdisciplinary subject, where different perspectives have been put together and a subject matter has been formed.
Created.
Then it is an interdisciplinary area. So both these things are a part of NEP now.
And I think the multidisciplinary approach is greatly beneficial at many levels. For one thing, it brings the interconnectedness of knowledge bodies. You
Yes.
begin to see the connections, otherwise you just can't apply. It brings in greater critical thinking because it brings in multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
It also allows teachers to collaborate more because you are going to draw on
Yes,
their
yes.
subject areas as well. And I think, if you look at even creativity or problem solving skills, if you're able to see the connections between subject areas, your creativity and problem solving skills will be enhanced.
Yes.
So if we take, I think if we to take a practical example again for viewers, I think if we look at migration, for example, that could be a multidisciplinary.
Yes, it can be studied
right?
from the point of view of geography, from the point of view of history, economics, uh, biology,
Right.
because salmons migrate, animals migrate, human
Right.
beings migrate. So from different perspectives, it can be studied.
Or it could be, for example, collection of information. Like how do you
Yes.
collect information? So, data collection in mathematics is is done in one particular way, or economics, or social sciences. So, for a higher class, if they examine how are they collecting information,
Yeah.
that can become not only a skill but a multidisciplinary.
Yeah. Actually, Anju, I am a huge beneficiary of, I won't call it exactly multidisciplinary perspective, but multidisciplinary degrees.
Okay.
So, when I got out of school, I did zoology honors for my BSc, and then I left the science stream and I went into MA political science. And then I left it, and then I did MPhil African studies, and then I did LLB, and in between I did a diploma in French language. And I realized that when I was doing just science, I was looking at things from a very science perspective. Everything has to have logic, it has to have some experiments, it should have been proven. And then you get into arts and you start looking at different shades. Then you start looking at foreign affairs and African studies, and you see what is happening practically. I actually got the benefit of this education because I couldn't decide what to do. And I got the benefit of multiple perspectives.
That is just so marvelous to hear. I do hope that our teachers and parents, whoever hears this, encourages children to follow their path, as they discover.
Yeah.
The example you give is the fact that you continue to explore different streams intuitively and whatever corresponded to your calling at that time. And that's wonderful because that's how we learn. And then you apply that knowledge you gain in one particular field in another field.
Oh, yes. All of that has been so helpful in my entire service. The science part, the law part, the foreign affairs, and looking at other countries part, everything.
That is incredible. Thank you for sharing that. We also can now talk about the assessment.
Yes, assessment, in fact, there's a huge shift.
Oh, yes. Thank God.
Yeah,
Finally.
I know.
Mm.
So earlier we were just looking at one thing, summative assessment. Unit test is a summative assessment. Half yearly, summative assessment. Final exam, summative assessment. Nothing but summative. Now the shift is, number one, you have to assess the whole child. Okay, so you're not just going to assess the cognitive or the academic abilities, but you should be able to assess what the child is able to do in arts and humanities, is a good doing good community service, for example. You have to assess the whole child. The second is that we shift from only summative to several formative assessments alongside summative assessment. The third is, earlier we were focusing only on uh, individual progress in terms of marks, etc. Now the focus is, what is the competency that the child has acquired? Has the child acquired certain skills that we want the child to acquire in a particular grade or a particular stage? 21st century skills was never a part of assessment. It is now a part of assessment.
Oh.
Technology was never integrated in assessment. It is now to be integrated in assessment. Earlier, group work or collaboration was not considered, you can't assess group work or collaboration, but in formative assessment, you can assess group work and collaboration. So now competition is giving way to collaborations. So these are huge, huge shifts.
And these are worldwide trends, because I think
Yes.
world over we are moving to in that direction. But I mean, after all, nobody wants a grumpy doctor, right? So you have to look at the social and emotional aspect of in a holistic sense, and a competency that is acquired. But if the child doesn't grow into a balanced adult, that competency is of no use.
Yeah.
If you cannot work in a team in an office, then there's no point, because you
And we
you
have
can't
several of those.
and that's an issue. People are fighting for little ego battles. They don't know how to communicate. There's miscommunication. So these are skills that need to be imbibed and inculcated when the children are at school. But because school education never gave it any importance, and because assessments didn't till now, these were largely ignored. Now the holistic progress card is going to be integrating
Yes.
all of these skills and development of the child in a much more holistic perspective.
Yes,
They're
and I
giving value to the fact that you may not be counting accurately all the time, but you're a great team player.
Yes,
So
absolutely. And that is important.
important,
Yep.
because it's not only this, because the child may need to do something else later on. I think that's really wonderful. You also mentioned technology. And technology, again, what comes to mind when people use the term technology, first of all, is IT and resources. And very often I hear, yes, but schools don't have, my school doesn't have enough of resources. Technology is a divider, rural and urban, people don't have enough. What's the scene like?
Okay, firstly, I must, remove that myth. Uh, India is actually one of the countries of the world where the number of mobile phones, smartphones, is one of the highest. So, per family, perhaps there will be a smartphone in 90% of the households. There is a recent survey which was done by a private organization where they found that children in the secondary stage, for example, have almost 90% access to smartphones.
Wow.
So, when we talk about technology, it's not just that you have to have a computer room and you have to have internet. We are talking about every technology that the child is exposed to. In NEP, it gives a very, very nice description that we are talking about all technology as an application, whether it is to literature. For example, literature is translated in 11 different languages with the help of a Government of India tool called Bhashini. Now, that is technology. So, what application does technology have in literature? What application does it have, let us say, in science or history or geography or civics or mathematics? That is what we want to teach the children. So, what is the technology around you, and how is that made? To which subject, which discipline or multidisciplinary perspective it applies to, children need to understand that, and that's what NEP says. Also, the use of technology tools in teaching and learning, as we acquire more and more resources in the schools, this has to grow. That is the idea. The third thing is technology will have to be used hugely for students with disabilities. And we are already using quite a lot, and a lot of is available also, but it is the best way to give them full access to quality education. So that is what technology integration is all about.
Thank you for sharing all of that. When we're talking about assessments, therefore, I think with this holistic way of assessing, we are going to hopefully remove the fear of examinations and the fear of failure amongst children. So, in assessment, NAP has written very clearly that there are different kinds of assessment. One is assessment of learning, one is assessment for learning, and one is assessment as learning.
Yeah.
Would you like to just explain that?
So far we have been doing only assessment of learning. So assessment of learning is nothing but summative assessment. NEP wants us to add to that assessment for learning, which is formative assessment, which can be done while the teacher is teaching in the class. Children are learning just to gauge where the children are. Quickly do a quiz, quickly do a role play, quickly tell the children to sit down in groups and then, come out with the most important learning or takeaway
Or make a poster
or
or
make a
draw
poster,
something.
something like that. So that is assessment for learning, and assessment as learning is all about self-reflection, metacognition. So when children self-reflect, that is the best form of learning. When they themselves are able to point out, I have been able to do this, this is where I'm lacking, this is where I need more help, etc. That is the best way of learning.
And that hardly requires any resource. It's just that you need to create the space for children and give the time to children to reflect and share the reflection.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I think the other paradigm shift would be teacher capacity building.
Yes. So teacher capacity, the changes are huge again. Teachers have been seen only as knowledge providers so far and nothing else. Actually, now teachers need to transform into facilitators and not just knowledge providers. The second thing is that teachers will have to not just focus on academic advancement, but they'll have to focus on the holistic development of the child. Earlier, the teachers used to do a pedagogy which is one size fits all. Now it has to be very flexible, and the learning experiences have to be very wide ranging now for the child, not just the typical chalkboard experience. And also, the teachers as well as the students have to learn to become lifelong learners. Things are changing very fast. We've spoken about it in our previous podcast.
Yes.
And unless you are a lifelong learner, it is going to be very difficult to go forward. So, these are some of the things which teachers.
So there is a lot of talk about, all this is great, NAP is fine and it's lovely vision or policy, but, teachers are ultimately the crux of any big reform. And if teacher training programs don't change and they are not given the wherewithal, the resources or the knowledge of how to implement these changes, how to bring that, the changes may just not happen. And my own experience, I would say that the teacher training programs also need to change. We need to bring in more experiential learning pedagogies into the, the B.Ed classes, or
I would
in
say not just pre-service, even in service. The experience of a teacher while learning or being capacity being built must be experiential. Otherwise, the teacher won't know the joys of experiential learning, and she won't unleash it in her class.
Yes, so the teacher must herself undergo
Yes.
and understand those through her own experience. So that I think the teacher training programs really need to have a fundamental shift in the way they are conducted, and in both in terms of content and pedagogy.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that brings us more or less to the end of this particular episode, which is really about the paradigm shifts that have been unleashed by the NEP 2020, and the fact that if you're looking at assessments are changing, multidisciplinarity is there.
Yes.
Teachers'
Pedagogy has
relationship.
changed.
Hmm.
Yeah, and contextualization, the content, everything has to change. The learning standards themselves have undergone so much change.
And what I've understood through this is that actually all these paradigm shifts that we're talking about, they're also interconnected.
Yes.
And that's wonderful, because if you're talking about assessment, the assessment cannot take place without a pedagogical change. So they are all interconnected in so many ways.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for today's session. We hope this was useful and you enjoyed it. Please do follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The link is in the description. See you the next time on Neptunes. This is Anju Shazo. Thank you.